Good morning and good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to another series of our LinkedIn Live, talking to experts in the CX arena. Neil is the co-founder of DataOrb, and so an analytics and insights platform. And so we're going to have some interesting discussion with him today. He's got 15 years experience in customer experience, which is good because that's what we talk about on these podcasts. Spanning a number of industries and verticals, and definitely a leader in this space. So we're happy to have him join us today. So Neil, once again, good morning.
Thank you, Tom.
Yeah, and fantastic. So, and for everybody's baselining, I'm Tom Lewis. I'm the SVP of Consulting, Analytics, and AI at TTEC Digital, a CX advisory and technology company. But today we're not going to talk about DataOrb much, and we're not going to talk about TTEC Digital specifically. Instead, I want to pick Neil's brain as it relates to insights and analytics and so forth. And so, part of what I think is advancing in the marketplace is these capabilities of getting, fantastic insights from unstructured data. And what do I mean by unstructured data? Conversations that our customers are having with customer service and via lots of different channels and both digital and voice and whatnot. And I guess my question right off the bat is, how do you figure out, I don't know, I was going to say fact from fiction, but dividing between what people are saying that's insightful and helpful for the organization versus, just noise that potentially could be, misconstrued or over-indexed based on the technology that's being used to evaluate it?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think the core of it is that, what's the core part of your business? So think of, let's say you are one of the largest coffee companies on the planet, and if you're not good at making coffee, you can't stay relevant in the business. Same thing if you're an airline and you have only one job, to fly people. And if you're not good
Right.
at it, you can't really be in the business. So it boils down to, when we work with our customers, it boils down to the three critical, sort of life cycle stages that we look at for their customers. One is acquiring customers. Second is keeping the customers that they're acquiring. And then third is expanding the wallet share. And at every one of these life cycle stages, there are a series of interactions that are happening. And the key point about insights, which is like a very broad term, is to sort of boil down to, how can those insights help me be better at each of this life cycle stage to compete better, differentiate, and as well as serve value to the customer. And I think I'm sure that as we dig in, we'll go more detail about what those insights look like.
Yeah. Well, and so how is that different from other insights or voice of the customer kind of programs that companies do? And how would you stitch the traditional insights from what customers say with what are more modern, sort of tactics?
Yeah, insights is really not that sort of a new buzzword. It's been around in the industry for about 20 years. People
Sure.
have been talking about it. And I think today it's very funny that if somebody makes something in Excel spreadsheet, they just call it insight because we love to refer everything as an insight. When we started looking in the industry, again, my roots are in healthcare and building a healthcare AI system that sort of prevents fraud, but also identifies medical errors in the data. And there were two things that we learned early on, right? Number one is that you want to make sure that insights are absolutely verifiable. And insights are not just data about the data, but it's really about, where the gaps are in my processes, in my business, and what improvement opportunities does it present. And it has to be statistically relevant and contextually meaningful. And when we saw like the current state of insights are, people have sort of two ways that they deal with today. One is, the old school speech intelligence or speech analytics, where, all they're doing is building taxonomies and building keywords.
And
Takes
typically over
years.
stuff that you already know exists,
Right,
right? I mean,
right, exactly.
it's you're looking for what you think you're looking for.
Exactly. And the problem with that approach is always like, you know, imagine that, take a step back and imagine if you were to send your customer an email with set of keywords and have them kind of figure it out, what it means. It's just not sustainable. It's not scalable to kind of, you want the root cause insight and all you're trying to track is the keyword, right? That's the one big challenge in the industry. The second problem that we have seen in the industry is sort of a pre-trained models for, let's say, sentiment analysis that people have built. But that inherently means that the model had to be trained on all different patterns of data and all the label data in order for it to predict. But as you very well know, in the contact center industry or customer experience, that customer needs constantly evolve. You launch new products, new services, and customer find new ways to communicate because the way they communicate on call is very different than the way they communicate on Twitter or email or chat.
Sure.
So the context is very different. And so when we look at like sort of the old school of way of doing insight, I think that all people did was figure some kind of a topic cluster and just kind of know why people are calling, but they would not trust that insight to actually take an action because it's just a set of keywords, that billing and payment. But now today, when we look at insights in this sort of a new era of a much more advanced AI systems, we are looking at insights to ensure that it follows sort of the three fundamental laws, right? Number one is that whatever insight you generate has to be verifiable. You cannot ship insights that are not verifiable in the context of the customer scenario. The second is that the models that you build should not require for you to ingest keywords, taxonomies, do some clustering and prompt engineering. It should be context aware, language agnostic, so that it understands variety of this communication that's happening. And the third is, I think that people have misunderstood when they call insight, they always think one dimensional, but insight is actually multidimensional. So think of this way. When you are tracking customer sentiment being negative, it's just a one dimension, but you want to understand, hey, what is the key driver behind this negative sentiment? And is this driver been a systemic problem? Is it emerging problem? And then how does that impact my sales? And how does that impact my churn? And so it's very hierarchical in nature.
Got it. Well, so one of the things I worry about is, and I refer to it as a black box. You use the system and it spits out, as you pointed out, insights. And so because the system spit it out, you sort of think it has integrity. In fact, it reminds me of that lawsuit with Avianca where the lawyer used ChatGPT and it came up with all these citations and so forth. And the thing had hallucinated and made up the answers and so forth. Well, when you're talking about analytics and insights into a customer, it's a much smaller and narrower world. But I would think that black box idea causes some trepidation among your customers. Now, so you alluded to it. So what should people who are looking at analytics tools? You gave sort of the ability, the traceability piece of it. So maybe dive a little bit deeper into that in terms of what people should be looking for to not feel like it's a black box.
Yeah. Great question. So, it was kind of a funny story when we started working into contact center and customer experience side of it. The first time we were just surprised that people did not care about the traceability and the evidence. It's not something that industry has ever looked at. And we came from healthcare, so we can't just say there's a 50% chance patient is going to die. You have to explain every piece of it. And so when we started building the system from day one, we built it to make sure that the system is verifiable and trackable, auditable end to end. There is no black box because, there is another practical side of the problem, which is that, imagine you are CEO of a large company and you're going to bring this new shiny AI system and you tell your users, well, you know what, just trust. I know it works.
Right.
Well, it doesn't work that way because you have skeptics and you have enthusiasts, and both of them want some level of traceability to build that trust in the system. So getting back to that lawsuit and, sort of the way, I think one of the misunderstood sort of concept in the industry is that they think hallucination is a bug for generative AI. Well, it's actually a feature. It has always been the feature. The systems are not trained to ground their decisions in reality. It is built to predict the next possible word. And it
Right.
really works well when you are doing, let's say, blog post writing or some kind of an essay writing, but it doesn't really scale well when you are looking at enterprise workflow, which demands full transparency, full auditability, end to end. So the way we have built the systems are, number one is you have to have a system which understands the language or comprehends the language and the nuances of the language. So that's one part of the puzzle, which is where the large language models or the language models comes very handy. But then you have to represent a real world knowledge to the system, right? Because it needs to be aware of these concepts. And like imagine this, that if every time you asked about gravity and the system gave you a different answer, that's just not, like gravity is well-defined concept. Same thing like when you think about sentiment, customer pain point, customers' risk of churn, sales effectiveness. These are well-defined concepts. And those concepts have a lot of research as well in academia that, what we have done is that we have represented that into our AI system so it understands those fundamentals. So we don't have to kind of like do a keyword for what the resolution status means or what does the customer sentiment means, but it can naturally track that. Once it tracks it, it actually gives you the clear dialogues and the citation that which context led to that decision making, but it also gives you the rationale because, if you think about, there are sort of two level of truth. One truth is, or three maybe. One is explicit. Customer did say this. Second is implicit. The customer implied. And the
Right.
third is inferred. Inferred is that based on this context, I'm inferring that this could be the situation. And you want the system to track each one of them and provide the evidence so that you have a better control on the inference or the explicitness or the implicitness.
I would imagine that, though, you run into situations where somebody's been running an operation for a very long time. They feel like they really know their customers. They've listened to 1,000 calls, et cetera. And if you ask them, I don't know, a question that would otherwise be considered an insight, and they would give you an answer, and then you run run a process, run the analytics around it, try to glean what is actually going on the floor, and it's different. You run into that situation, I imagine, and maybe sort of opine on how the skeptics in that realm, because like I know my customers best, and the empirical data doesn't necessarily back that up.
Yeah, I think that, I would say that when we look at sort of 2021, 2022, that was a big challenge. Most people were not as, what do you call, open-minded in terms of challenging the conventional wisdom. But
Yep.
now what we are seeing is that everybody is putting their AI strategy together because they know that if they don't get on the bandwagon, they're left behind. And
Right.
quite honestly, most businesses have been recording or storing this data for years. So they know that there is something in the data, but they just
Right.
haven't had a way to sort of figure out like what I can get out of it. And now with the sort of the clarity in the business, and as they are competing more and more in the market, they are realizing the need for change. But you'll always have that conventional wisdom to kind of fight through. And the best way is that you onboard the skeptics, and once they see their conventional wisdom being challenged, it's very easy. It just requires one piece of insight, and that just brings them over.
Yeah. And so many of the analytic tools are very focused on what I would call the traditional models around operational efficiency in the call center.
Yeah.
What is it that the agent's doing? How's the flow throughout the call center? But my hypothesis and what we do in our analytics practice is really those insights can impact everything from product direction to marketing to
Exactly.
not enterprise operations and things like that. And so maybe opine on that just a little bit in terms of where you see the maximum sort of value return relative to capturing this unstructured data, these customer insights beyond the contact center.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's a little bit of more pragmatic view to it, and there is more of a sort of ROI view. I'll put both to kind of together. So when you look at sort of from the pragmatic perspective, you go into any company and you ask any of the leader or employee and say, do you like they don't intend to do bad to the customer, right? Like nobody
Right.
like, okay, I'm gonna start my day today and I'm gonna, screw up this X, Y, and Z. The reason that happens is because their decisions are not grounded in the context of a customer.
Right.
Well, when you look at a product team making a decision, or marketing, or sales, or contact center operations, or customer experience, like everyone, they don't have the right context of their customer, and all they have is like maybe NPS survey at the most, which is a kind of gaming by itself in terms of like who did you send to survey and how many data points do you have. So that's one. We see that openness is there. The second part of the question about the ROI side, right? And so I see that from a sort of a maturity level point of view, right? So one is that people think that there is early wins around contact center efficiency, but when we do this ROI modeling very clearly, would you rather shove off, let's say, maybe 30 seconds from the call, or would you be, it's a matter of LTV, and most businesses know what's their LTV per customer. If you were to retain, let's say, 5% more customers, and that math is right there. The challenge has been that such insights have not been available to
Right.
actually run those kind of simulation. But now that is available. So if people understand that there is a need to become proactive instead of reactive, and that brings the additional value. But when you put those use cases together and then the ROI models together, there's a clear line of sight that we don't run contact center just to kind of serve or do the service, but rather delivering value. And these are not just cliches anymore. Like we are seeing it, that from the data, you can predict the churn risk 10 steps ahead because this customer is calling and telling you, I bought this and you haven't installed. How do you expect me to use your services if it's not working? And then at
Right.
the same time, we are also saying that there are elderly people and they are sent to the chat bots, they're sent to chat. There are people with accessibility issues. They're blind and they're sent. So all of these insights are kind of missed in the sort of digitization. But when we put this in front of the product people, in front of the service people, they are able to sort of connect those dots.
Yeah, for sure. I think when I have conversations with customers, clients, that is, they don't necessarily know what they're looking for, and so what they do know that they're trying to improve the overall operation. They're trying to figure out what other insights they can bring to the enterprise beyond. And so the return on investment for using a tool like yours seems pretty straightforward. The 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 first step is to have a conversation and to understand what the strategic direction, the high level of the company is, or that area, and try to figure out how additional insights would help. Like, for example, if part of the business is having, I won't even be specific, or just having a particular issue, how much, how helpful could that be for the enterprise if you knew that your customers actually thought this, that, or the other thing. And so my hypothesis is, not my hypothesis, but my approach is to go in to a client and have a conversation about the art of the possible of basically infinite insight. And so my suggestion to those listening in today is to pick up the phone, call Neil, and have that introductory discussion and talk about how much impact you could have on the organization. Because no longer is it the case where the contact center is simply a cost center. I think people are really figuring out that it's definitely a golden jewel of the organization. Customer insight is the strategic asset, and it's not just for agent efficiency and operational effectiveness. It's a much broader topic. So with that, Neil, my assumption is you would welcome those conversations, and they can call me and we'll get them on the phone together, what have you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that that'll be fantastic. We can share our learning from all the implementations that we are having at different part of the world and how we are helping different verticals sort of transform. And I think the key point is that we are not just kind of like talking and doing a slideware, which what we see often in the industry, but these are like real world scenarios that are getting implemented and impacted. And so yeah, would love to talk about those things.
Outstanding. Well, thank you for the time today. I enjoyed the discussion very much, as always. And thank you, everybody, for joining us on this LinkedIn Live discussion today.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you,
Thank you.
everyone.